Hi everybody. In this video we are going to study PHP sessions. Now what exactly a session is? So I will say that a session is a mechanism using which the user's data is available across various pages of the same website. Now what exactly does that mean? So to understand this, let's take example of internet banking. Now, whenever you log on to your bank's website, on the home page you may see your balance. Now, on the home page you may also see a link of, let's say, fixed deposits. When you click on the link of the fixed deposits, you will see whose fixed deposits? Obviously yours. Now what this means is that your bank's website remembers that it is you who had logged in on the earlier page, and it should be showing the fixed deposits of yours and not of any other bank's user. That way, if you go to any page of your bank's website, okay, I repeat, any page of the bank's website, then it will be showing you details related to you and nobody else. This is possible because of the mechanism of sessions in PHP. Also try and remember that many a times when you don't perform any activity on your bank's website, it will display a message like session terminated. Now if you still don't understand what it means, then let me show you with the help of an example program, and later on I'll be explaining you this program in great detail. So using the HTML forms, I have displayed username and password over here. The name of this file is session1.html. Look at the mouse cursor. So I'll give the name Jack and I'll give the password 123 and I'll click on submit. Okay, Jack and 123 are the correct username and the password. So I click on submit. Now when I click on submit, this takes me to a file called session1.php. Look at the name of the file above the mouse pointer. So inside session1.php, it says, hi Jack Lal, you are now logged in. So Jack Lal is the full name of the user. It says you are now logged in. Now something very interesting and different is going to take place over here. It says click here to continue. So I'll click here. Now when I click here to continue, see that the page changes. So now this has taken me to another page. Look at the name of this file. Look at the name of the page. It is session2.php. And inside session2.php also it tells me, welcome back Jack Lal. You are now logged in as Jack. Now what you need to understand over here, that if this page is displaying Jack Lal, it is not displaying Jack Lal as a mere coincidence. We have used some mechanism over here to retrieve the username Jack Lal over here. This was possible because of sessions. So now let's try and understand what exactly a session is. But before I explain you the program on session, again I'll give you the same advice. What I suggest is that you pause the video and you first read the entire note on PHP sessions which I have provided to you, and after you read these notes, come back and watch the video. So then I'll explain you three related programs. One is session1.html, then session1.php and sessions2.php. Okay, so first go back to your notes and read the notes. Okay, welcome back. I assume that you have already read your notes. So now let's start with the program. So as you see over here, look at the left of your screen. In Notepad++, I have opened a program session1.html. So this is a normal HTML program in which I have created a form. So if you look at this form, you will realize that in this form I am displaying the username, I am displaying password and a submit button. Now when I click on submit, then whatever data was inputted by the user, it will be given to this file session1.php. What I mean is that when I click on submit, our program will redirect us to session1.php. Not only that, the method which we have used over here is called post. I hope you remember the post method which we had done earlier. Okay, So now let me execute the program session1.html. Okay, so this is the output. This is the output of session1.html. If you wish, you can pause this video and you can just go through this code and corresponding the output which you see on the right of the screen. Okay, all right. So now what I'll do is, without filling in the username or password, I'll click on submit. Okay, so I click on submit. But before I click on submit, I'll just tell you one thing which has nothing to do with sessions. See, if you remember the earlier topic of HTTP authentication, in that topic I had not used HTML to display the username and password. In HTTP authentication, what we had done is we had used the basic header function of PHP to display the username and the password for us. But in the real world, what happens is that we use HTML code to display the form. We take the input inside the form and then we start with the PHP. Okay, so that's what we have done in this program, which will be actually done in the real world programs. Anyway, so this is the username and password. What I do is I keep both of them empty and I click on submit. Again, actually what I would have done is I would have also included JavaScript over here, and JavaScript would not have allowed me to leave username and password blank. But for the sake of simplicity, I'm not doing that over here. So I leave them blank and I click on submit. Now when I click on submit, tell me it will take us to which file? It will take us to session1.php. So now let's see session1.php in Notepad++. So look, this is session1.php. Again, what I recommend is that you pause the video and you go through this program a little quickly. So when you go through this program, you will realize that most of it is similar to authentication2.php. That means this program. This is the program which we had done in the earlier video. So most of this program, session1.php, is similar to this. So things which are similar, that obviously I'll not explain. Now if you look at line numbers 2, 3, 5, okay, you know what they do. They help us in establishing the connection. Now comes line number 7. Just go through this line number 7 and compare it with line number 8 of authentication2 program. So this is the authentication2 program. All right, if you remember, in this authentication2 program, we used to check the associative array called server, and we used to using the isSet function, we used to determine whether the element server of PHP authorized user and server of PHP authorized password is filled or not. If the user has not typed anything in the username and password, then isSet was returning false. Now please understand that now we are not using PHP for getting the username and password. We are using normal HTML form to get the username and password. So now what will happen is the username will be stored, the username and the password will be stored in the array post. Okay, so this is something which you already know, it's not new to you. So post of username will store the username with the user has typed, and that way post of password will store the password with the user has typed. Now see what happens over here. It's a very simple if condition. I have written if post of username not equal to nothing and post of password not equal to nothing. If you remember, in the earlier on this screen over here, I had not typed anything over here. So take a guess. This condition will be true or false? Well, it will be false, and so will this condition be. Even this condition will be false. Why? Because I had left both of them empty. Now because the two conditions are false, everything will be ignored and we directly come to this else, which is line number 36. Now see what I have done in line number 36. I have written a die function, and inside the die, see carefully, I have used the HTML code. Now within the HTML, I have created a paragraph, and see carefully, I have created one anchor tag. This anchor tag will display this thing. Click here to enter username and password, and when I click on this, it will take me to session1.html again. So let's see whether it happens or not. See, I click here, and yes, it takes me to session1.html. Now the same thing will happen if I type Jack, but I don't type passwords. See, the same thing will happen. Now what will happen is, if you see over here, if you try to correlate over here, now what will happen is this condition will be true, this much, but the second condition will be false, and vice versa. Let's say I leave this empty, and I type 1 2 3 over here, submit. Now what will happen is this condition, the one which I'm highlighting, will be true and the first condition will be false. Either ways, what our program will do is it will take us to this else part, and the else part will display click here to enter username and password. So I click here and it takes me again to the HTML file. Now let me give the username. Let me give the username JACKK, which is wrong, and the password 122. Sorry, I give you the right password 123, and I click on submit. Now remember, the username is correct but the password is wrong, so now I click on submit. Okay, now when I click on submit, it says invalid username password combination, click here. So I think you will remember how this works because we had done the same thing in the earlier program, but still very quickly let's go through this. Now in this case, what is happening is both these conditions of line number 7 will be true because both username and password are non-empty. So now we create two variables, UN and PW. UN will store the username, PW will store the password. So please remember, in line number 9 and 10, we are storing that username and password with the user has entered. Then if you remember, we had seen all this in the earlier program of authentication 2. I am creating a query, and this query will select those users whose username is equal to Jack, JACKK. Okay. Now what will happen is there is no user called JACKK Jack. Okay. So because of that, the number of rows will be equal to 0. And when number of rows is equal to 0, this die will execute and it will display the message. See carefully, invalid username password combination. Look here, the same message, invalid username password combination, and it says click here. So when I click here, it will take me again to session1.html. So I'll click here and it takes me again to session1.html. Now let me give the correct username but the wrong password, and I click on submit. Oh, I gave the correct password, so what I will do is I'll close the program and I will execute again. Okay, so that's session1.html. So I give the correct username JACK, but I give the wrong password 122 and I click on submit. Now again it gives me the output invalid username password combination, click here. But I hope you remember that this message is actually not same as earlier one. We don't want the user to know that what he has given wrong, username or password, because that way it will be easy for a hacker to hack into our system. So let's understand what must have happened over here. So come on, if you understood till here, tell me right now what will be the value of number of rows. So number of rows now will be equal to 1 because the username Jack was correct, and that one row is now stored in this variable row of line number 18. Okay, now remember, inside row there are 3 columns at position 0 1 2. Position 0 will actually store the full username, I mean full name of the user. Position 1 will store the username, position 2 will store the password. So now in line number 21, what I'm doing is I'm checking, see the mouse cursor, I'm checking whether the password entered by the user and the password stored in our database are correct, are equal or not. In our case it was unequal, so the else will execute, line number 31 will execute, and again in line number 31 you see a die which will display this message, and when I click on it, it will take me to session1.html. okay, alright, so now I click here and again I get username Jack. This time I'll give the correct password 123. okay, and now I click on submit. okay, so let's understand what has now happened. Obviously one thing you know, that now this condition is true, the condition of line number 21, and we enter the if. Inside if it says hi row of 0, that means hi Jackla, you are now logged in. Now if you are paying attention, you will realize till here this program is almost same as the earlier program authentication 2. The real part of sessions starts now. So look at these three statements, statement number 25, 26 and 27, they are related with sessions. Okay, so now how exactly we do session handling? So listen carefully. Whenever we want to start with a session, we write a very simple statement, session start. Now when I write session start, what PHP will do is it will start a session, as simple as that. Now in PHP there is one associative array called session. Okay, so what we are doing is inside the session array we are storing row of 0, that means the full name of the user, and row of 1, that is the username. Now I can use any ID over here, so I'm using the ID session name for storing the full name and session username for storing the username. There is one thing about which you should be careful over here, you should not get confused. In most of the programs what will happen is programmers will use the same variable name over here. So over here they will write username, okay, over here they will write name, over here they will write username. Okay, so there's one thing I want to tell you is that over here you can use any ID. You could have written simply ABC over here, you could have written simply XYZ over here, that does not matter. Okay, anyway, so what these three lines have done is line number 25 has started a session, and line number 26 and 27, what they have done is within the session array they have stored the full name and the username at position 0 and 1. And once that is done, there is a die function which will display click here to continue, and when I click here, see where it takes me. It takes me to session2.php. So now what I'll do is I'll click here, let's see what happens. So now when I click here, it takes me to, see this file session2.php. Now let's go to session2.php. okay, but just remember there's an array called session, inside which there is one ID, session name, session username. Okay, so let's go to session2.php. Now inside session2.php, the very first statement which I'll write is again session_start, the function call. Now what this function will do is it will check whether a session has already started, and if it is not started, then it will start a new session. But in our case, the session is already started, so what happens is no new session starts, it uses the old session. Now what I do, I write one if statement. Okay, I suggest that you pause the video for a few seconds and go through the condition of this if. If you go through this condition, you will realize I'm using the isSet function to check whether there are any values in session of session name, and we check whether there is any value inside session of session username. Okay, so do remember that in session1.php we had stored some values over here. Look, this is session1.php. So what do you think? Now these two conditions will be true or false? Of course they will be true. Now what I do is I create a very simple variable name and a simple variable username. Again, I could have created any variable over here, right, like ABC. I could have created any variable over here like XYZ. Inside name, I am storing this value. So tell me what this value will be. It will be Jack Lal. And inside username, I am storing this value. So this value will be Jack, the username. Okay. And then I write one echo statement which says welcome back Jack Lal. You are now logged in as Jack. Okay. And then what I do is purposely I give a call to session destroy. So the name itself is explanatory. Session destroy will do what? It will destroy the session and it will remove the values from this session array. In other words, it will unset the session array. There will be no values inside this session. So now let's see what will happen is, now what I will do is I will click on this refresh, reload this page, okay, and let's see what is happening. So I click on reload. When I click on reload, it says session terminated. If you remember on internet banking, on the internet banking sites, very often you will see a message, don't click on back button. Okay, and the reason for not clicking on the back button is same. When you click on back, the session gets terminated. Anyway, so over here, now let's try to understand how the session is actually terminated, the logic behind this. See, when you click on this reload page, remember by then this function is already executed, session destroy. So the next time the page loads, what happens again, this checking is done. This checking is done. And when this checking is done, these two conditions will return false. Why? Because currently there is no value inside the session array. So now the else part will execute. In the else part there is an echo which will tell you session terminated, click here. And when you click here, it will take you to session1.html so that you can log in once again. Alright, so that was sessions for you. Thank you very much.